Immanuel Kant was one of the great 18th century philosophers, and he's exactly as smug as he looks, but not entirely without justification, to be fair to him. This Preliminary to Metaphysics was published in 1783, and was an introduction or primer for those who found his critique of pure reason to be too big and hard for them. In this video we will look at the first three sections, the introduction, the preamble, and addressing the general problem. Disclaimer, I am not an academic, and even where I have indicated quotes, it may be tongue-in-cheek and at minimum is paraphrased for brevity, so please be aware. In the introduction, Kant encourages us. Before studying metaphysics, we should ask if metaphysics is even possible, because lots of people seem to be using metaphysics, but not in any really scientific way, not like all those other sciences that were rapidly being developed in those days. This was brought home to Kant even more by David Hume, who pointed out that we have no metaphysical mechanism for even something as intuitive as causality. Kant declared, "Challenge accepted." To him, Hume was basically questioning the possibility of a priori reasoning, and we can't have that. Kant decided that to answer Hume's objections, we needed to think about metaphysics in terms of concepts of connections, and also connections of concepts, but the important bit is the concepts of connections. And Kant was dismayed that philosophers of the day were rejecting Hume based only on appeals to simple common sense. Whereas Kant says even common sense should have a sensible argument behind it, and not just appeal to when no other explanation is forthcoming. Luckily for us all, Kant is here to deal with the problem properly. This book is an introduction to the way that answer will be constructed, which he does fully in the Critique of Pure Reason. Moving into the preamble, Kant says that metaphysics is not empirical by definition, and so it cannot be in any way a posteriori, based on experience. So it must therefore be entirely a priori, based on reason alone. However, mathematics is also purely a priori, but mathematics is not metaphysics, so we must clarify that metaphysics consists of pure philosophical knowledge, where knowledge is the product of reason. Pure means that it is a priori, and philosophical is to distinguish it from mathematical knowledge. One key distinction is between synthetic and analytic propositions. Analytic propositions expand a singular concept, giving no new information, and synthetic propositions enlarge and combine concepts. Kant's example of an analytic proposition is all bodies are extended, because the predicate is extended is already contained in the concept of a body. On the other hand, a synthetic judgment might be some bodies are heavy, because the concept of having a high weight is not included in the concept of a body. Remember, not everyone agrees that the analytic-synthetic distinction is real or relevant. The next important thing for metaphysical knowledge is that analytic judgments rest completely on the law of contradiction. That is, if you deny or negate them, you end up with a conceptual contradiction, such as saying that all bodies are not extended. And remember that this can even be true with empirical concepts. The statement, gold is a yellow metal, is also analytic and a priori, even though experience will always be necessary to make sense of the proposition. In form and concept, it is a contradiction to say that gold is not a yellow metal, in this world at least. When we turn to synthetic propositions, Kant says that they will conform to the law of contradiction, but they cannot be deduced from it. There will be nothing inherently contradictory about their form. There are four types of synthetic proposition: judgments of experience, which are always a posteriori, judgments of maths, of natural science, and of metaphysics, which are all at least partly a priori. This is an oversimplification, but broadly speaking, experience will always be synthetic because a certain particularity is added to any concept, and this makes it synthetic, while the experience itself makes it a posteriori. Mathematics requires operations combined with concepts and is therefore synthetic, but this is usually a priori and is then applied to the empirical world. Science uses a priori reason to construct a model of experience which is synthetic but heavily influenced by the a posteriori, like the gold example given above, and then metaphysics' whole purpose is to work a priori with the connections between concepts as concepts. This can involve working with concepts that are not metaphysical, strictly speaking. In section 3, Kant tells us how only he was able to uncover the analytic-synthetic distinction. He says that there was a hint of it in a certain chapter of Locke's essay on human understanding, but with such scarce clues, it is not surprising that even a great thinker like Hume failed to see it and spiraled into skepticism. The only way to clearly see these cognitive factors is to laboriously think through it for yourself. And it's hard, man. Oh, it's so hard. Like, really freaking hard, man. And of course, Kant is not at all repurposing one section of Locke as a justification of the theory that he has already constructed for himself. The general problem of metaphysics, as of right now, is that there is no science of metaphysics, and we are therefore left tempted by skepticism, even though reason hints at some larger, deeper structure of reality underlying. The science of metaphysics is in more detail in the Critique of Pure Reason, but here we will show where it comes from. And we must start from the kind of synthetic a priori knowledge that we get from science and mathematics, and hopefully thereby see how metaphysical knowledge is possible. So it is that from the analytic-synthetic and a priori a posteriori distinctions, we have 4 different possible classes: analytic a priori propositions, synthetic a priori propositions, analytic a posteriori propositions, and synthetic a posteriori propositions. Kant rules out the third class. He says they can never be an analytic proposition based on experience. Kant thinks all 3 remaining are possible. Analytic a priori and synthetic a posteriori are not considered in doubt. Only synthetic a priori propositions need justification. It was an inability to recognize these synthetic a priori propositions that led Hume into skepticism, but he did ask a salient question. How can we conceive of a necessary connection between 2 concepts, including 2 instantiated empirical concepts, if one is not somehow contained by the other? The answer is that these connections are not in the world, they are in the cognitive realm a priori. To achieve the preliminary aim of how metaphysics is possible, Kant will investigate the other types of proposed synthetic a priori propositions in both mathematics and natural science. The process will take place over 4 core questions. 1. How is pure mathematics possible? 2. How is pure natural science possible? 3. How is metaphysics possible in general? And 4. How is a science of metaphysics possible? So far in the preliminaries then, Kant has shown us the field of his investigation and introduced several important concepts that we're going to need to work with as we go forward. Chief among these is the synthetic-analytic distinction, and he uses this to focus in on synthetic a priori propositions as the business of metaphysics. Part of doing this is to consider the connections between concepts as concepts in themselves so that we can focus on those concepts of connections rather than just the concepts of objects that we normally think about. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this video, or at least that it has been somehow useful to you. Like it if you do think that, and bye for now.